I guess I have this question about like, is the self-made man thing a myth, or is it just kind of misunderstood?
When you say self-made man, meaning is there, and this is what I'm hearing it, tell me if this is kind of what you mean, is there, how much of success comes from skill versus luck? Is that along the line something similar to what you're asking
in a way
about?
too, but also like the means that someone might have. So for example, like if someone is born into a kind of wealthy family, they might be more likely to achieve a certain level of success rather than someone who has to, quote unquote, pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Well, I guess it kind of depends on how you're defining success, in my opinion, because if you're defining success as having a lot of money, right, then they probably are going to be more successful. But if you're defining success as an ability to deal with adverse scenarios, I think for sure it's going to be the person who did not have those means. So, I just finished watching Undercover Billionaire. Have you heard of that show, the video?
I haven't.
So it's actually a reality. It's a real life show, and I'm not 100% certain about the origins of who started it or who initiated the show. But from my understanding, Discovery Channel wanted to do a show on somebody. And that's about all I know about exactly what Discovery was looking at. What I do know, though, that Discovery ended up doing this show about a person named Glenn Stearns. And Glenn Stearns, he went through a lot of did not grow up with means. He had a child when he was 14 years old. I think he was voted the least likely to succeed. I don't know exactly what that was, where that was at, high school or something. But he ended up building a solid business in the mortgage industry, and ended up selling it. So he's actually a billionaire, not a millionaire, but a billionaire. But he heard from people that, he questioned for himself how much of his success was due to luck versus how much of it was due to really some skill that he had picked up. So he somehow got a hold of Discovery Channel, and they decided he was going to challenge himself. They were up to videotaping him, to making a video about it, and he was going to challenge himself. So he changed his last name to Glenn Bryant, which actually was his middle name. And they were going to drop him off in some city somewhere that he had no idea where he was going to get dropped off. And he only had $100 in his pocket. And they gave him also a pickup truck that he could drive as well. So he goes from being worth over $1 billion, taking a helicopter off his private yacht, getting on his private plane, getting dropped off to a place called Erie, Pennsylvania. And then, so this is I just finished it. It's a 8-part series. It's 8 episodes in the first series. And he basically gives himself the challenge where he has to make a business worth $1 million in 90 days. And if he fails at that, even by 1 cent, then he's going to pump $1 million of his own cash into that business. So basically, he gives himself some sort of limit. So, I think that, there's a lot of ability for, a person, for success in a person. There's a lot of, if success is defined as monetary wealth, which in many ways in society, it's, the ability, when somebody gives you their hard-earned money, their hard-earned cash for some sort of service or product that you can provide them, that in a way is at least part of, perhaps even a large part of, a definition of success. Our definition, societal definition, but it is a definition of success. Money is very helpful in society to survive, to pay rent, different things. So I think that it is something that can be learned, is learned, can be learned, and that it's. So what was the question again? How do we define not how do we define success? I'm getting carried away with the whole movie that I
Sure.
just saw. I was super excited about.
I guess the notion of the self-made man or pulling oneself up by their bootstraps.
And I think that it's definitely doable. I think it's a lot harder than people think. And I think that probably for myself, one of the main areas that I am, I guess, struggling in or focusing in really is the aspect of discipline. And I may have mentioned this previously, but just discipline itself is something that is for me, or that I think is all encompassing, because you can be disciplined at anything, at so many things, right? So you can be disciplined at exercising, at working out. You can be disciplined at spending time, just how you delegate your time and designate your time. Are you going to spend time with your family? When are you going to spend time with your family? Are you going to spend time working on social media? Are you going to spend time working on your music? When are you going to spend time working on your music? When are you going to spend time working on the podcast? So there are so many things that can take over our entire day, that the day can just go by, and we can end up whatever age that we did not imagine before we accomplished a fraction of what we really thought we would accomplish by that age. So I think that by being disciplined, and we're able to put into the schedule what we want to accomplish, and then sticking to that, whether or not we feel like it or not, that's going to be a huge factor. Then we turn around a year later, if we spent 365 days or 200 days or whatever it is working on one particular thing that we set out initially to work on, then we definitely we're going to see some tremendous growth. And so in terms of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, I think that discipline is a huge factor in it, because sometimes we feel like doing something and other times we don't feel like doing it. So if we're disciplined and doing those items that we know to be towards our goal, working towards our goal, then ultimately we're going to, it's going to, that I think we're going to see ourselves really making headway, making inroads. And that's kind of what I view as pulling yourself up by the bootstraps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although I do feel like there are differences in, I guess the counter argument would be like how much time is actually allotted. And so it's like you can be very disciplined, but if there's not enough time allotted in your schedule, then you may not be able to even do any of the things that you feel so disciplined and motivated to do. And so it's like maybe someone who grew up wealthy, again, sort of this disparity of someone born to rich parents versus someone pulling themselves up from nothing, is like someone who grows up wealthy may have the ability and the time to kind of be disciplined in those things and develop those skills in a way that maybe someone who didn't have a whole lot of means growing up to be able to kind of have those skills develop maybe at a sooner point in their life or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying, and so just to kind of explore that point a little bit, because I didn't really compare the idea of discipline to somebody, let's say, who has has a lot of means, and I think the idea with discipline is that even for somebody with means, I think it's such can people learn discipline? Yes, I think so. And so somebody perhaps that has the right education or is in the right environment, either from the parents or from the school, let's say, I don't know, Harvard or Yale, if they teach a discipline or not, or sometimes, people, if their parents just have it, they don't necessarily have to teach it to their children, but their children might just see it and they might just pick it up. But yeah, so let's just take two scenarios, right? If you have somebody who, has to, at a young age, at 14 years old, has to go and work in the field, or work anywhere in McDonald's or 16 years old, and they have to, they're working at a minimum wage, and they're doing that because the parents need them to go to work because they have to pay their rent. That person is going to have probably a lot more difficulty and struggles in just the time, like you're mentioning, the time that's allotted them, the time that they have to work on other skills and other areas. And then
right. But at the same time, they would have a lot more discipline because they'd be able to kind of know that, whenever I leave school, I then go to work. And those are skills that maybe someone who has a lot of means wouldn't. And so someone who grows up rich or something might just go home and smoke weed or something stupid. Not that smoking weed is stupid necessarily, but
right. But if that's all they're doing and they're not being, they're not, thinking about the future, then that I don't think that would be very smart. So I think that kind of, drills down the point, right? That it doesn't matter in some ways how a person is brought up, whether they're brought up with means or not, at least in terms of having discipline, because somebody could be brought up with a lot of money and have the discipline because they see it around them, or because they've taken initiative, or because they had the time to learn it, or they learn it. But somebody could also be brought up with a lot of money and sort of just say, I'm chill, I'm fine, I've got everything I need. Why would I want to work hard for? So that could be, and then you can also have somebody, who doesn't have any means, right? And so they could see, I want to get up there. They see people who have money and they say, I want to work hard. There's no reason why they should have it and I can't have it. It's just about it. I can work hard. But you can also have those people that are blaming everybody else too. So, I don't have the right, I don't have the right resources. I don't have this. I don't have that. There's no way for me to do it. I'm doomed. And so then they could also, not sort of get depressed and not even try anymore. So I think that, in terms of, I guess, statistically speaking, if success is defined by the amount of money, for sure, people who have more money stays in the family, right? That's just the way it generally works. Somebody owns property, they pass it down through whatever methods that are allowed legally. And so there is that reality, if that is how success is defined. And like I said, I do believe that is a large portion, in a large way, that success is defined. But I think that there are opportunities, albeit it's going to be harder in some ways. But just as an aside, right, that I've heard that, it's like a muscle, right? Success is like a muscle. And that kind of brings the point home to how Glenn Stearns was able to recreate their business. And I won't say whether or not he hit that $1 million mark or not, but he did some things that were very amazing, and things that he was able to recreate what he did in some ways, what he had previously did. And that's because he already has that experience. He knows how to do certain things. He knows how to bring a team together. He knows how to find an idea, pick an idea, choose an idea, and build a team around it and work towards creating that business, that reality, to make it valuable, to make people want to be invested inside of it. So it's like a muscle. So in that sense, the person who doesn't grow up with means has an advantage, because the person who does not grow up with means and is able to find even small successes, I would say, even small successes, they're able to reproduce that. And they're a lot more resilient than somebody who grows up without without those means. It doesn't have to do that. So I think that, one of the keys to anybody, rich or poor, wealthy or not, in society, is to work on just trying to be the best that we can be, to better ourselves, to work on our discipline in doing that, and then building off of that. So whatever, taking steps forward, and for myself, financially building the business is not about making the money, I think, right? It's not so much about making the money. It's about being able to impact a large number of people, right? So the more, the wider, the more people that we can impact, that we can give to, that we can provide something of value to, that I think is really what's going to define success. And that can be done at any level, right? I mean, yes, it's going to be easier if somebody's working at McDonald's. You know what? Maybe they can impact people there at McDonald's too, right? They can, they can smile, they can give excellent service, they can, they can impact McDonald's has lots of people going through it, right? But I do realize that it would be more difficult if somebody has less time. But I think that is really how I would define success, is really just an ability to share something, to give people something of value, which could be a whole lot of different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think that, kind of the further question surrounding that is sort of it seems as though, like, statistically speaking, the amount of social mobility has been decreasing in the United States, and sort of this idea of the American dream has sort of been falling away, and that more so that, like, because social mobility has been decreasing, because the wealth gap has been increasing statistically, it does seem as though, like, the American dream is sort of falling away. But I don't know, it's kind of weird because, like, from my point of view, being an immigrant, I kind of see both sides of that, in that I'm kind of an example of the American dream, but it's also like I can look around and see all of the other examples that are contrary to that, and kind of, I don't know, it's interesting, and this whole discussion surrounding it is sort of like, I guess, just the bigger question being, is the American dream dead?
So let me preface this a little bit by just kind of giving a little bit of background about my what's it called? My social social experience, social education, social awareness, right? So in my high school, I'm not sure if I mentioned this previously, but my high school was very much to the left of the political spectrum. The past 10 years or so, my circle has gone more to the center and more to the right, politically. And, and there are different reasons for that. But part of that, the difference between the left and the right, from what I've seen, right? I consider myself very, I'm sure everybody thinks they're balanced and center, and anybody who's more to the left is way to the left. Everybody's more to the right is way to the right. But I think of myself anyway. So one of the main differences that I see in that political spectrum on the left and the right is going to be as it relates to economics, right? How you view business and economics. So I'm just prefacing it a little bit to kind of, full disclosure, share that that right now my community tends to lean more to the right, the community that I'm in. But I do have that experience that it was on the left. But so, in terms of social, I think, I honestly, for myself, I don't want to think about who has more than me and what is being done to keep me down, right? That's just not a productive way of thinking, right? Like, where would I be during the Russian Revolution? I don't know where I would have been. I don't know what in some ways, if there is an opportunity to overthrow the powers and to redistribute the wealth, right? That's an attractive opportunity for a lot of people, for the majority of people, for the masses of people. It's like, if you have 99, I don't know what those percentage and ratios are, right? You have 99% of the wealth combined in 5% of the population, whatever those percentages are. Yeah, for sure, that would be a very nice opportunity. However, so how that happened, and are we in a good society, the best society? What are the alternatives? Communism, socialism? I think, I tend to think that, or from my experiences, that the alternative is it decreases people's ambition, right? the more, I do think that there should be some sort of base level of what's provided to people, because there's people who just can't necessarily provide for themselves, or they have difficulty. But I think that, motivation is a huge, and I'm not saying there aren't issues with capitalism, right? But I think that motivation is a big, it's a plus, right? Having motivation, having for myself, I like being motivated. I want to be motivated. And so, is the American dream dead? I mean, that was kind of the preface of the Undercover Billionaire. And people might agree with him, might not agree with him. Might say, he's special, he's unique, whatever. He had video cameras around him, and yeah, there are going to be lots of scenarios that not everybody has, and everything. But anybody can point to one specific example. You can have a billion other examples when it failed. But I think a large part, a large part of a person's success starts up here. It starts up here in the mind. And if a person, really believes and doesn't give up and wants to be successful and puts in the work, yes, I don't want to say there's no guarantee that anything's going to happen. But I think that if a person gives up mentally, and says it's not going to work, then for sure it's not going to work. The only chance at having success is if mentally they believe they believe that they are going to be successful, whatever the definition of success is. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know if I definitely don't. I do not think the American dream is dead. You call it an American dream, call it a universal dream, whatever dream. I know. And yes, honestly, I don't know too much about international politics to say, is it possible in some countries where there might be a dictatorship to succeed? I think that there are possibilities, and it might be very, very difficult. And maybe it does include overthrowing the dictatorship. But I think that, I guess, I don't know if this is, in line with the American dream being dead or not, but basically just that there's always hope. There's always hope. No matter what that is, no matter how that hope looks like, there's always hope. Whether it's on an individual basis and whether it's working really hard and working within the system, or maybe it includes doing something, changing the system, right? Changing the laws, or in some extreme scenarios, overthrowing the system, right? Like as what happened in Russia, which I don't think it turned out super well, in hindsight for sure. Or maybe in some countries like in Libya, where they overthrew the Gaddafi. And are they better situation? Maybe they're getting there. So I think that definitely, I'm just trying to work hard and better myself, and just trying to provide a service to the people. And I'll bring in an interesting just a note that for myself is kind of it's like hovering overhead also. Like in traditionally, like I'm Jewish, and I'm also observant. Not as observant as some, more observant than others, but in the Orthodox community, there's a tendency to support Trump, right? President Trump, Donald Trump. He did things for Israel that makes a lot of people in the Orthodox community support him, and so like moving the embassy to Jerusalem. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the details of what he did for Israel, but I don't know. I also look at society from the perspective of what historically what has happened to the Jewish people, what has happened to the Jewish people, and what could happen to the Jewish people in certain scenarios, under certain scenarios. Whether or not somebody is religious or not religious and Jewish, like you had what happened with Hitler, and he didn't care if a person was religious or not religious. If they had one Jewish grandparent, they were considered Jewish enough for his purposes. So that's just kind of an overarching, I guess, cloud a little bit that's kind of just hovering there and saying, okay, well, what is society going to look like? How will these different movements, how will the Jews be viewed? Will they be viewed as, as an enemy on the one hand? And so anyway, so it's I think that success is very, I don't think the American dream is dead, and I'm working hard towards it. In summary.
And you actually kind of segued pretty well into kind of the other thing that I was going to ask about, which is like you spent some time in Israel. And so since we are kind of talking about society and culture a little bit in a certain way, how did your time in Israel sort of give a different perspective to how you view both cultures?
So Israel is an interesting place. For myself, my purpose for going out there was really because I wanted to explore my roots as a Jewish person without the sort of black and white way that I feel Jews in the United States are. In the United States, there's a lot of either you're religious or you're not religious. There's kind of within the Jewish community, there's like that separation, so to speak. But in Israel, you have people who are, you have the whole spectrum out there, right? I mean, somebody out there basically is, they can feel they're Israeli, and there's, and they can, obviously the majority of people out there are Jews, even though they'll have a lot of other nation, other cultures out there as well. But so I felt like I could explore myself, my Judaism within that, without having that pressure of trying to fit into one or the other sides, the groups here in the United States. But and Israel has a huge mix of even within the Jewish population out there, of people from all over the world. I mean, you have people from Iran, you have people from North Africa, you have people from Europe, you have people from America, United States, South America. You just have a huge mix of people out there. And yes, there are going to be subcultures within that Israeli culture. So, obviously you're going to have different groups from different parts of the world sticking together because they have similar languages, similar foods, music, whatever it is, cultures. But the culture is also very much Middle Eastern. It's large. It's very, in terms of, it's a military culture. It's a hard culture. There's a mandatory draft for the most part for both men and women. Usually the men are, go out there join the military for 3 years, the women for 2 years. The women generally are not going to be in the front lines fighting units. But so it's a very, on the one hand, there's a name for Israelis. They call them a sabra, which is a cactus, which is like very prickly on the outside, but very soft on the inside. And so, for me, that culture is very direct culture, different from what I was used to in the United States. So, growing up, if I was staring at somebody for too long, we would usually end up talking smack to each other and maybe even fighting, just the high school that I was at. But over there in Israel, like there's a long, hard stare. Like when somebody sees you and it's like there's not that hesitation because it could be life or death. If they don't analyze you and they don't, make sure that you're friendly, then if then that could be the end of them. So they basically they'll size you up, they'll look at you, they'll size you up, and they'll see based on if you're wearing a big heavy coat in the summertime, something looks funny, right? Or you can see if somebody's if it's cold outside and they're sweating, right? Then something might be off. You might be nervous about something. So there's a lot of that directness. And the culture is very, very, very confrontational in some ways. But so that for me took a little bit of getting used to. But I think for myself it was a little bit easier because I've grown up overseas. I spent time overseas in various countries. So for me, just seeing different cultures wasn't as shocking to me. as for some people that had maybe gone out there and hadn't experienced being overseas at all before. So I think that's kind of my take on Israel. Coming back here, I do after being there for a while, I really kind of appreciated. I learned to appreciate the softness a little bit of being in the United States, and how people might be a little bit more polite, and not necessarily tell you what they think about you, even if because maybe what they're thinking isn't necessarily so polite. So they'll rethink if their thoughts are appropriate here in the United States, and they might. So they'll try to work on their character traits in that way. So I think there's pluses and minuses in both societies. On the one hand, in Israel, it's nice. It's kind of refreshing to get that directness and kind of know exactly the person is. They're not hiding any of their feelings, whatever they're thinking. They're telling you what they're thinking. On the other hand, it can also be a little stressful to always be confronting that on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And it's nice to kind of just be able to have people that are a little more chill.
Yeah, definitely. It does seem like, even just the examples that you've given, it is kind of interesting to note, because it's like a culture and a people that have not even just like personally individual on, like, they do have to kind of be paranoid in certain terms, but also kind of even genetically as a people, like, have to be watching their back because so many generations of them have been persecuted so strongly. And so it is kind of interesting that notion of like that kind of that hard stare that you mentioned is like, I don't know, it almost even sounds to me like a genetic paranoia, if you will, of like, look, we've got to watch our backs because it seems like everyone is out to get us. And if you look at history, it seems like everyone is out to get you, Yeah. And so I guess kind of comparing that to the United States, to where it's like, since it's such a huge melting pot of people, it does seem like there's more openness, more willingness to kind of compromise and try different things, because you're less likely to just like it's just less dangerous, obviously, but like it's also it seems like opportunity seems to come by a little more readily in the United States. Is that kind of your perspective?
Yeah. So, you brought up a couple of points right there. I think that in the United States, there's, for myself, right, and I can't speak for other people, other Jewish people or anybody else, but for myself, I have a apprehension even from going certain places and wearing a yarmulke or a kippah on my head, looking Jewish, because there is in some places, in some spaces, some anti-Semitism, underlying anti-Semitism. Now, whether or not that's going to turn into something, whether or not that's going to actualize into something, it does pop up once in a while. When there's a shooting in New Jersey, I think we just had just 1 year ago, the year anniversary in the supermarket over there. There are different scenarios, right? And not that Jews are the only ones that are targeted. There are a lot of minority communities that are targeted and can be targeted. But there is that, even here in the United States, right, that simmering or that underlying apprehension. Now, on the other hand, I try to avoid those thoughts even, but I see everybody as part of the same human race. And so, when somebody can be targeted, whether Jewish or not Jewish, any people that can be targeted based on some religion or nationality or race. Like, I just really, I don't want to understand that mentality. I do not want to understand it. And so I think there's a big, I want to, almost in some ways, I want to just take off my kippah, take off the yarmulke, and just look like everybody else, which I think is the kind of the melting pot scenario. But so on the one hand, you kind of want to just be like everybody else, but on the other hand, it's also a place where somebody can be comfortable and confident, at least theoretically, and I think in many ways more so than any other place in the world, with being unique, being different, having their own culture, having their own religion, having their own, wherever they come from, place in the world where they come from, and be okay with it, be proud of it. And so it's kind of that here in the United States, that dichotomy between, wanting to and being able to be different and be unique, and on the other hand, just kind of where you want to just kind of blend in and fit in with the mainstream.
So I guess kind of trying to tie it back a little bit, you had mentioned that you had mentioned that there's some, like, you don't want opportunity or ambition to go away, but you want some sort of not nothing for people who can't provide those means. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Honestly, I'm not quite sure, right? So I used to be all for just anti-capitalist and pro-socialist back when I was in high school, and I don't know what that would look like, honestly. I don't know what it would look like in terms of, the whatever, I think that, the world is too rich for people to be starving, right? Like there's plenty of food to go around. So I don't know how to balance that with ambition. Like, is ambition something that us as a society need to try and train people in? Or is it something that's going to be inherent? So where somebody wants to get things for free, that's on them. Like, let them get it for free and not have and then they're, that's going to decrease the ambition. It is, so is it up to me personally to say, you know what, I don't want to take anything for free, and because I know that that's going to help me to increase my ambition, and just the discipline of having that increased ambition, it might just help me to go above and beyond where I would otherwise go. Whereas if I accept a handout, right, then maybe that would decrease my ambition. And so that sort of that muscle in the brain, I think discipline and success is going to be like a muscle in the brain, where if you exercise it, then it's going to help. It's going to help further. I mean, it's going to help you go above and beyond where you would otherwise be able to get. It's, we had our share, growing up, we were on welfare. My mom was on food stamps. There was, we struggled a lot financially. And I have 7 other siblings. And when we came to the States, really didn't have, we lived in a trailer park. We lived in a motorhome. We were, very, it was tough. We were struggling a lot. My mom didn't have a college education. My parents got divorced. My mother went back to school, back to college, and I was basically left on my own. When I was 17, I was living on my own, trying to pay my own rent. I had my younger sister living with me too. I was supporting her also for a little bit. So I don't really, I don't come from a place where things were handed to me at all. But right now, I do think that there is going to be, I do see for myself the benefit in struggle a little bit, and in having that, and in exercising that motivation and that ambition. But on the other hand, like I said, there's the world is too there's no reason why anybody should be left in the dust as well, right? Like they're just, but how do we as a society determine who to help and how much to help them, right? I mean, we want to help people who need it. We don't want to help people who don't need it, who are just taking advantage. So, do you leave it up to the individual? Because, I don't want to say inherently people are lazy, but there's that, water flows to the place of lowest resistance. So if somebody's handing something to you, you know what, take it, right? Like who wouldn't take it? It's hard not to take it. Very few people would say, no, I'm not going to take it because I want to work on my motivation, because I want to work on my discipline, because I want to work on that muscle. I'm not going to take it. It's very few people would do that. So, kind of as a society, how do you balance that? I think is probably, a huge question and not easily answered.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation that needs to be had more often. I think that, more people my age, and you can really see it in social media a whole lot, which is like more people my age are being sort of pro-socialism, pro-communism. And I guess for myself, like I'm kind of pragmatically libertarian and ideally communist, if you will. And so it's like the pragmatism is sort of like, well, I don't really trust government to take care of things in, like, if we look at the way government is handling things now, and then if we try and just apply these sort of socialism type ideas to the government that is already existing, I wouldn't really trust that to happen. And I feel like that's a conversation that isn't happening among people my age or amongst ourselves. But then also kind of the other extreme is that sort of more moral argument, like you're saying, is that like the United States and just the world in general is so wealthy that there's no reason why anyone should be starving anyways. And so it's like the pragmatist in me is sort of like, I look at the system and I don't trust it the way it is. And that's sort of what you had mentioned earlier as sort of like not wanting to look at what's sort of holding you down, because it sort of keeps you from achieving what you can rather than looking at all the things that you can't. But at the same time, it's like if you are actually like trying to go up a hill or something and something keeps pushing you down, you can only keep trying to go up that hill so many times before you're like, all right, there must be something wrong here, that it's not just me that I can't do this, because it seems like everything else seems to be holding me down. And so I think that's kind of where a lot of the motivation comes from with younger people sort of looking towards socialism as a form of a solution, because we are sort of stopping to look around and be like, there seems to be something more here than just like a lack of motivation. And so when we look at the system and go, it's like, why is it that millennials were all encouraged to go to college, and then as soon as we're out of college, there's no jobs for us? And now we're like with this pile of crippling debt, and we also like can't get a job in any field whatsoever. And so it's like, well, we should have been looking at other things, but it's not what our culture sort of encouraged us to do. And sort of these contradictions between culture and society and the systems that kind of brought us up seem to be, the more that we inspect it, the more that this veneer seems to be falling off. And it's like, well, it doesn't seem like this is working the way that we initially intended it to. And that's kind of the bigger part of where this conversation is coming from, is that like the idea of the American dream. And then at some point, like at what point does the self not have enough power per se to be able to motivate their way out of it, or discipline their way out of it? And so it's like, I feel like we're questioning the system a lot. And it's funny, you had mentioned something else earlier too, which is like how a a rich parent might have a kid who is like, oh, well, I'm good, I'm chill. And so it's like there's this pendulum swing that happens from generation to generation, which is like one generation is well off, and so they might have like lazy kids, and then or the sort of progressivism versus conservatism, maybe the stereotype of like the child of the Christian pastor tends to be way rebellious and does a whole bunch of bad stuff, and sort of that pendulum swing of like, I feel like maybe our generation was raised by people who believe that like, oh, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're gonna like do all right, and you just have to be determined and motivated enough to do these things. But then we're kind of on the other side of that, from like being raised from that point of view, and then kind of seeing that like it doesn't seem like it's working anymore. And so like I kind of ask about that because it is kind of like, I guess, at what point, does the determination, the discipline kind of go away, and is there more to it?
So
sorry, that was a long rambling
yeah,
thing.
no, that's cool. It's helpful for me to, I also want to know about you and, what's going on, how you're thinking and stuff. So it's, I mean, the way I think of, the history of the world and the economy, right? I mean, I know that there were, and probably still are, societies where things were a lot more communalistic, socialistic. I mean, and you can go nowadays. You can say even some places in Europe, maybe there's the free education, the free medical, things like that, which is not communistic, but it's more so the socialistic on the spectrum. And then you can take it, to some of the Native American tribes, where even though there was some sort of hierarchy, not that I know tons about it, but that things were very, from my understanding, socialistic in nature, where it was kind of, there was. People, I don't know how much a person needed to be motivated in order to get food. I don't know. There was a family, there was but my thing on a big picture history, economic history, is that really money is simply a means of bartering. That's all it is, right? The idea of cash, the idea of money is, where did it start from? It started from, you had George had corn and Jack had whatever Jack had, apples, and they needed each other's produce. So they would trade each other's produce. Okay, I'll give you this much corn for this many apples, and they would trade. And then you would add a third person into it. So they were just writing IOUs. Okay, you know what? I'm going to give you, I'll give you this many, I'll owe you this much, because it's going to be a different season. So I'll owe you this much. And then, and so basically it's just a way of bartering with each other, just a method of, now, right nowadays, it's completely blown out of proportion and money is being printed, and anybody who thinks that money is valuable is going to be in for a big surprise, in my opinion, and different people that I've been hearing about. I mean, but money is really nothing right now. Money is just a piece of paper that has some value because we place value inside of it. So the idea of motivation, sort of reaching its limit. I think that education and knowledge, the right knowledge, is critical, because if it's not to say that some sort of redistribution of wealth would never be in the picture, right? But it is to say that whoever is succeeding in this society, compare that to somebody who's not succeeding in the society. I'm not talking about somebody who's born with money, somebody, compared to somebody who's not born with money. I'm saying if take two people from the same economic or the same position where they're able to have the same experiences, and one person succeeds and another person does not succeed, it's only because of the type of knowledge that person has. And you could also throw an ambition and motivation in there too. But I think that the idea of I think that an ability to know how our monetary system works, how it's working, right? How who is funding, who is saying that everybody should go to university and go to school and go into debt for $50,000, $100,000, and come out of school with, in some area that we really don't have the marketable skills, or the economy is just doing terrible. And so we're in this huge debt, and we have to pay this money back, and it can't be let go in a bankruptcy. There's a lot of there's a lot of information that we are being fed, and that we think is the right knowledge and the right information, but ultimately it's not really. Like, yes, education, getting a degree, in my opinion, can be very good for confidence. The person, they say, what, I'm going to be the first one in my family, or whatever it is. I'm going to get this information. Education, all that information, all that education can be gotten somewhere else. Right now, everything's available online. Somebody can buy, the same for the books. If you think about the books that we bought in college and university, and how much we spent on those books versus how much we spent on the tuition, for a 20th of the price, I could have gotten those same books, gotten pretty much the same education for a fraction of the cost if I was disciplined in reading those books, and if I knew that was going to be sufficient, and I thought I did not need this degree on my wall to get me a job afterwards. So there's definitely, there are mistakes, or there are things that are being fed, or whoever, there are things that people are doing in society for whoever, whether it's because of a lack of information, whether it's because you have these marketers and these all these lenders that are saying, we're going to lend you money, whether it's the government, whether it's private banks, whatever it is, and so they're benefiting, right? They're getting the interest off of the loans that are being lent out. And meanwhile, there's a lot of people who are without jobs. So I think that getting the right information and the right education, again, it's not to say that redistribution is never going to be in the picture. It should never be in the picture at some point. But I do think that, for myself, a huge part of my motivation is trying to get the right education, the right information. How are things working? Who is trying to, how do I think about money? I need to think about money just in a way of just using it as just paper, just a way to barter with somebody for something. So take whatever cash I have. It's not doing any good if cash is just sitting inside the bank, right? It's not doing any good. It's just sitting there, and I'm not bartering. I'm not getting anything of value really by having it sit somewhere. And it's something that I'm trying to educate myself in, but something that I hear a lot of people who have figured this, who have made it sort of from nothing to something, they're able to basically give people enough of something of value that people want to barter with them, want to trade them this almost valueless paper that we call money. They want to give it to them, and so they can take that money and they can give that money to something else that to them is more valuable than that cash. So I think that's, for myself, that, and whether or not it's a socialistic society or a communistic society or a capitalistic society, I think that's not going to go away. The idea of bartering and trading, maybe the type of money, maybe the amount of goods that are going to be distributed to people, without having to work, it could be changed, would be changed, but just the idea of bartering seems so. It's in every society. The ones that I mentioned, whether it's in Europe or the Native American tribes. I mean, I imagine there was some aspect of trading services, trading goods. You have just the husband goes out hunting and the wife is cooking, for example, right? In the stereotypical scenario, that's a form of bartering, right? I mean, he's doing what he can do, she's doing what she can do, and they're coming together for the better of the whole of the group. So obviously, things can be taken way out of proportion, and from the small family picture. But I think at the core, at the essence of it, the right knowledge and the right frame of mind of understanding what exactly money is critical, no matter what society a person is going to be living in.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, that's something that keeps coming up in the podcast, is about like, how do we make the world a better place? And with a lot of the questions that I tend to ask, it always does kind of come back down to education. If we know a little bit more of what we're doing and how we're doing and that affects the people around us. And then the other part is that I think that, going back even to the very first thing, is that like, whenever you said like, oh, well, how do you measure success? And so it's like, do you measure it by, at least in America, it seems like people measure it by money, but at least in the sort of different cultural point of view might be like, well, I value my family and I value relationships with people and I value being able to be at home and eat the food that I want to, or be content doing the things that I want to be doing. And that's a sort of value that you may not necessarily get just from hoarding a whole bunch of money. And there's a whole lot of like information showing that like there's a threshold after which a certain person's income, that like they're not any happier after that certain point. And so it's like, so at that point, it's sort of proving that like money isn't what is going to make you any happier. It's not what's going to make your life any more fulfilled. It is these sort of human things that are actually going to provide the actual wealth in your life. And so kind of like what you're saying is like, whether it be a capitalistic or socialistic society or whatever it might be, there's still going to be those human interactions with people. There's still going to be, relationships and children and generations coming after that. And however we decide to go into the future, it may or may not include, I don't know, I find the notion of having money and selling money for money in return or something like this just distribution of wealth in this system that we've sort of created, that is kind of a snake eating its own tail, is like, it's getting really distant and far away from the things that actually make us human and happy and fulfilled. And whatever success might mean to anyone, it does kind of eventually come back down to like the thing that on your deathbed you're going to be like, this is what I wish I had done more of, or I'm glad that I got to spend time with my kids or spend time with my wife or whatever that may be for you. And that like by the end of it, the money won't matter.
Right, 100%. And then I think, the people the successful people that I like to learn from are definitely those that, are those that say that it's definitely not the money that makes them happy. It's only what they can do with the money. And so meaning they like to be able to spend free time with the family. They like to be able to go on vacation. They like to be able to provide for the family a nice house and their kids can get a nice yard. So it's definitely not the money. And that kind of goes along with what you were just saying right there, not keeping the money sitting inside the bank. But as you also mentioned, there's this whole, society culture where there's just the idea of the distribution of money or just the idea of money making money and, being able to lend out 8 times as much money as you're holding for somebody. There's a whole culture of what this money, of what money is and how money should be used in the finance world that is really not, it's not really, it's very far removed from the original from the original purpose of money is just a bartering tool, bartering system. At the same time, I think there's also a very, it's a lot more difficult kind of bringing things back around to what we spoke about, towards the beginning, that somebody who doesn't necessarily have the education or the means or the family connections of people who have already learned about this stuff and experienced this stuff, and they know the right type of they know what money is. They know how to think about money, whether it's culturally they didn't grow up with it, whether it's because they didn't get the right education or any education about it. I think that there's that those people are definitely going to be at a disadvantage, and they're going to have a lot. They're going to be they're going to have to work a lot harder, and they're going to be less likely to probably figure the stuff out if they don't have the right mentors around them, the right people around them, the right education, and also if they're busy working, right? If they're busy, they don't have the same time to be looking at this other stuff. So I definitely think that they would be at a disadvantage, but I still think that there's that anybody who listens to your podcast, let's say about the stuff you're talking about, or that that come across it, I think that there's a lot of, I don't think it's impossible for anybody. I don't think it's impossible for anybody to get their proper education and to reject those things that are not, that are just noise. There's a lot of noise out there, and I know a lot of people that I follow. Some of my mentors, they say that getting a university education is noise. They say it's not worth it. I got an education and I'm still paying for it. But I do think there's probably a lot of truth to that for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to university because that's what they think they're supposed to do, and because it's supposed to provide them with opportunities, and it might do that in some ways for a lot of people. But is that worth the trade-off of the debt, long-term debt, the time spent in it, et I don't know. But so I think that people, I don't think it's out of reach for anybody. But even though there are going to be, people who have it provided to them more easily, and they might be more likely to get it.
Sure. Yeah. One last thing. What is a book or movie or documentary or TV show or just one thing of media that you are really into that you think other people should get to know?
I'm going to say what I'm most recently have been looking at, because that's going to be the thing that's most prominent in my mind. Just the undercover billionaire, that show is pretty, for myself, that's nice to see. It's motivating because I see, how somebody can do it from really literally from nothing. And the main part of it for me was having the right idea, go from nothing to building a team together. And I think that team is the critical component, and being able to build something out of nothing. Literally, this guy was sitting inside of his truck. He was throwing up. He was thinking about quitting. And, he got the flu, sleeping. And so there's just so many things, but to see that it was possible for him to do was, that's pretty impactful for me and motivating for me, just in terms of the technically thinking about how to go about doing something, right? He wasn't thinking about, I want to have a business for me. I want to be the owner of a business, and I'm going to hire people. These people were working for free. They had no idea who he was. They built a team around an idea. They were all working, putting in their own sweat equity, because they believed they built a relationship with him, and they believed in the idea that he really was bringing into fruition. So for me, that was very impactful. That's the most impactful thing recently on my mind. I've got a shelf full of books over here that I've been looking at. One book I'm reading right now, which is kind of interesting, is Napoleon Bonaparte, the French. He came around during the Revolution. He also came from nothing. He was a minority in France. He was part of the outcast society, and he really built his way up. And I imagine there's going to be a lot of people in Europe, and probably also in France too, that have negative feelings about him. I grew up, thinking about him as an amazing person, like somebody who really brought about, they changed the society in France from being feudalistic, from being where there was a king with different classes, to really introducing and bringing the, I don't know if he introduced it, but the was kind of what the revolution did, and he was supporting it for a while at least, the idea that everybody's equal. Jews were emancipated in whatever countries that he would conquer. He would basically, for the most part, say that allow the Jews to be equal in society and to engage in the different types of businesses as anybody else would. But he did that for all minorities. He did that for anybody. So he was really, and minorities or non-minorities, just people who were different class systems. So that was really what he was pushing. And I think that was, it's an interesting book. Right now I'm reading towards the end of it when he started getting defeated. But I think his ideas caught on and still live on today in many parts of the world. The idea of equality, anyway, so it's an interesting book. It's a long book. It's like, I don't know, 700 pages or something, which I usually don't read that long book, that length books. And I don't want to read also, I found myself kind of not as interested in reading about his demise as I was about when he was having, a lot of successes, which I guess it's going to be, natural. But I'm even thinking about not finishing the book just because I want to stay positive. I want to stay with the growth mindset. Anyways, that's kind of couple of things. One book on the book end and one on the video TV end.
Yeah. Although I will sort of encourage that, just being on the positive end, you also do want to acknowledge that, hey, there were some factors that contributed to his demise. Right. So it's probably very important that if you are going to sort of model something after this person, you might want to know what sort of mistakes were made.
Staying realistic. And it's interesting you point that out. And I was thinking about that. Where was his mistake? And you can see practically his, at what point did he lose the first battle, really? And that was when he went into Moscow, when he started going into Russia and started attacking the Russians over there. The Russians, whatever was going on, there was some disagreement. And so at a certain point, and I think it can happen with a lot of people in any place in the world, under any society, under any type of success that they might be achieving, they feel like they are beyond failure, that they just can't fail, that they've seen so much success. And that's when I think they can make mistakes, is when they just sort of start getting arrogant and start making, so I think staying humble and staying, remembering your roots, really. And that might be one of the disadvantages in growing up with means, is that you think that maybe, that success is coming to you, that, the idea that, you and your family are somehow better. That's why you were born into a family that had a lot of means, can cause somebody to make mistakes. So anyways, so definitely point taken, agreed that looking at what causes somebody's downfall is very important to hopefully not make those similar mistakes.
Sure. So, yeah, awesome. Thank you for doing this with me. Where can we find you and your things?
I'm most active on Facebook, Michael Wander. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube. Actually, I'm putting out these YouTube videos. It's kind of my go-to place for creating these content, these videos where hopefully I'm trying to contribute to society somehow and educate people in whatever way that I know I'm able to educate them about in the current society we're living in this capitalist society. Who knows how long it's going to be around for, but for right now, being able to help people to not pay as much taxes and not pay too much taxes, and just be able to sort of bring whatever service and opportunities they have, whatever product or service that they have and they want to contribute to the world, to help them to do that in a way that's gonna keep them out of trouble with the law and to keep them not paying too many taxes, and to also ideally try and help them grow it. Internet is amazing. Social media is amazing. So basically, YouTube, you could find me, Michael Wander CPA, MichaelWander, Michael Wander CPA. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'm Santiago Ramones.
And I am Michael Wander. Thank you, Santiago.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. Bloom is available now, streaming everywhere. Put it on in the background or show it to your friends so you can all enjoy it together. You can also buy it on Bandcamp and get bonus content so you can sit alone in the dark with your headphones on and listen to the album in its entirety while reading and looking at the bonus content. I also make music with Power Cycle, an experimental electronic trio. Our first completely improvised album, Too Many Damn Cables, is streaming everywhere. To support this podcast, leave reviews, comments, tell your friends about it, and buy my music, because by supporting me, you're supporting the podcast. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.